Welcome to Timeout with Coach Tony Garbelotto, where we talk all things British basketball coaching. Today, we have a true legend of the game with over 40 national titles, coach to numerous national team players, and one of the pioneers of British basketball coaching. I would like to welcome Coach Betty Codona OBE. Coach, firstly, I really appreciate you coming on today. It's a real privilege and an honor to be able to talk to you. As I always do with my guests, I ask them, a simple question, but how did you get involved in the game? Especially, due to the fact that it was such a long time ago, where the game obviously isn't where it is it is today.
Well, it was just pure luck, really. At college, I was training to be a teacher, and I played for the college teams, loads of the teams, but specifically with the netball team. We decided to go in and watch the men playing basketball, as young women are wont to do in their university days. So we went in to watch them playing basketball, and I thought it looked really good. So I suggested to the other netballers that we tried it. And we just played a little bit at college. But then when I got into teaching, and I was teaching PE at that time, I'd done the usual traditional stuff, netball, hockey, gym and dance, which was it in those days. And then thought after a year or so, I thought, really? We've done this now to death, these four. I enjoyed the basketball. I'll do some with the girls. And they just absolutely loved it. I can't tell you how much they enjoyed it. And the first thing they did when they were about to leave school was come and say to me, will you start a club up? And there we were, the first ever women's basketball club.
Betty, at this time that you're talking about, what type of knowledge of the game of basketball did you have? Or, did you have some coaching type of ideas? And who were some of your influences at this time?
No, not at that point, because I knew about what you could put on a postage stamp about basketball. In fact, when I look back, I think, oh my heavens, how much did I actually not know? But we played, and as we played, we realized we needed to find people to play against. And as there were no other women's teams, we joined the local men's league and played in the local men's league. And through that, I got to know people. And in the early days, and obviously I got more into the sport, looked into it, how it was run, etc., and decided to go for my level 2. And it was Maurice Wordsworth who took my level 2 course, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And I have to say, Maurice was a great help to me in those days. And, I have to mention him because then when a few more of the women's teams started to get set up, we ended up in the first ever final of the women's game down in London against a team called Abbey Wood. And, of course, we haven't got a coach as such because I did the coaching and the training in the local league. And I asked Maurice to coach us on that occasion, and he did so. So Maurice certainly was an influence. And then I would have to say, I realized that we needed to try and get a coach. And at that time, a team called the Scorpions. I don't know if a team called the Scorpions were playing in Sheffield, and they had some really good players. And one of the university students who was a player in the Scorpions, I managed to persuade him to come and coach us. His name was Bob Berry, and you're going back a lot of years to remember him.
Was there a light bulb moment or a time when you realized that you wanted to coach the game of basketball?
I think an offshoot, really. I loved teaching at that time. I mean, you couldn't pay me enough money to go in and teach nowadays, but at that time, I loved it. It was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. And the coaching came as a result of the young women who were enthused by the basketball in the school time, and then who went on to become the first lot of players. And then finally, I think the final thing was when I was a bit older and Bob had gone to Australia, I changed back into a sort of player coach. And my husband said to me, you need to decide whether you want to play or coach, because you're not doing either as well as you can do. So I think that was possibly the light bulb moment. I was reluctant to give up playing. I was reluctant to give up coaching. But, he made the point very nicely to me. And I thought, well, yes. I mean, by that time I was in my 30s, and I decided to certainly give up playing with the first senior team.
Was there some early parts of your coaching philosophy that you can remember that resonated, that you were starting to form at this early stage in your coaching career?
I think, again, it was, at that time, it was possibly a lack of knowledge, what it would entail, what was required. And also, when we first started the team, I had a bit of a light bulb moment in the very early days, because I suddenly realized on one occasion when only 6 players turned up to training that I couldn't do it that way. And I just said to everybody, you either turn up to every session or don't bother coming. And because I was so annoyed that there were only 6 people there when there should have been 12. And at that point, some of them did stop, but it didn't bother me in that sense, because I've always said, give me 6 totally committed players above a squad of 12 where 3/4 of them couldn't care less. So it was really getting ourselves established correctly with the correct disciplines and what we needed to do to play in a national league as such. So we were a bit late. Plus we went in, when we did go into the league, again, it was a time when I was sort of having to make my mind up about whether I was going to keep on coaching or keep on playing. So that was it, really.
Where at this time were you finding additional information for coaching and the game of basketball at this time that we're talking about at this moment?
What I did, because I quickly realized, as I mentioned earlier, that I didn't know a lot about this sport. So I actually investigated, looked around. And one of the places we played in the early days, someone that did have a women's team, was an American air base in North Yorkshire. And we went there to play. And we became big friends with the basketballers at this air base. And we were very honoured in a way, because apparently what the air bases did at that time, they used to fetch over a very sort of prime coach from college basketball to do a course for all the American air bases. And I got invited to that, so I went. And I then went to every possible course I could find and get on. Honestly, I've been to loads and loads and loads of courses because I wanted to know more. I wanted to learn, and I wanted to learn from different people and from the best people.
It's great that you were able to access these types of courses and resources. And I know that speaking to you in the past, we've obviously talked about that's just such a great type of situation for any coach to be able to continuously go on these type of courses. Who else at this time was helping shape your coaching kind of first parts of your philosophy?
Well, in the earlier days, and because I kept on doing that for years, even when I became a national coach, because I'm a firm believer, you can never stop learning. Someone can always give you something a little bit extra. And if they can't give you anything else, they can reinforce aspects of how you coach yourself. So I still kept on going on the courses. And I think the thing is that if I had to say one of the biggest influence of anyone, though, was Bob Berry, who first coached us as the first women's team. He had quite a philosophy, that young man. He played for England, but he was 5'9", and he was totally uncompromising. You know, you look at the different styles. Well, with Bob, there was only one style. You did what he asked you to do, and you did it as hard and as tough as you could. I mean, one of his rules that's always stayed with me, and he had numbers of these, was if you were in the wrong half of the court when somebody was attacking your basket, or before the next training, whenever, you had to do 10 sprints of the court. I totally loved his rules. I mean, we lost one or two players because he was so uncompromising. But basically, I loved it. And particularly, he was very much about let's be a team. So after every training, we had to go to the pub. There was no asking. Finish your training, you went to the pub as a group. And things like that, you know. I mean, the other one that often stays in my mind about him is, and unfortunately, we did lose a couple of players as a result of his methods, so to speak. But, you know, I've spoken to some of them since, and they all regret it. But he did because of his uncompromising ways. But he had all sorts of rules like that, things that you should and should not do. And you have got to work hard all the time. If you didn't work hard, if you didn't meet his standards, you'd get the punishments and so on. And I know that we've gone through different eras in basketball where they say, punishment doesn't work and you're not supposed to give people press-ups and things. And I think that's often depends on how the punishment comes about and your coach and how they deal with it.
Coach, I think that we have gone too far the other way now with this situation. I honestly think that young people, on the whole, are struggling with the concept of true hard work, determination, resiliency. And in my personal opinion, there's no doubt that they're softer than ever before. And I'm not sure, and it's my own personal belief, but I don't think this is a good mixture to produce high-level athletes. And of course, I am being, this is a generalization from my side.
Well, absolutely, totally. And another example, two examples with Bob very quickly. One player had not got, this one was about being late. If you were late, you sprinted 10 times around the court. And that day, I'll never forget it because I was slightly late. And one of the younger girls was, so we were giving her 10, so I duly did mine. And she was 18, and her mum had come with her. And her mum said, no, she's not doing it. So Bob said, well, you better leave then. So she turned up again to the next session with her mum, and Bob said to the girl and her mum, why are you here? And to train. He said, right, before you train, you've got 10 laps to do. And that girl and her mother took that girl away in such a strop, and we never saw her for a few years. She came back to the sport, but she definitely regretted it because she was a very talented young lady and missed out on a number of years. And then the other one was, and this is, people can't believe this, but I understood it. We went down to play in London, and we played the team. I don't know if you remember these names, with Pauline Birch, and they were called the Tigers. Anyway, we went down, and we just gained a new player, a teacher who'd come up from London, very tall, about 6'2", great netball player, but wanted basketball and became a really good basketball player. And we went down to the game, and the first thing she did was go over and hug all her London friends and what have you. Came back to the bench, and Bob said, right, sit on it because that's where you're spending the game. And we were like, oh my God, speechless, because, she was one of our best players. We played a sort of a fast-breaking type game, and she was, at her height and athleticism, she was often, up ahead and scored multiple points. But she sat during the entire game out, and he said to her after, before we start, they are your opponents. You don't go and socialize and be friendly with them. After the game's over, then you do that, and we'll all socialize and talk to each other then. But before the game, no. And she spent the game on the bench.
When we talk about dynasties in British basketball, we definitely talk about programs like Crystal Palace and Kingston, and even to the latter day, someone like Newcastle Eagles. But what you built is for sure on that level and some. So talk to me about how the club started to grow and what was the process to start building this incredible club.
The thing was, we went in and we actually came bottom in the National League the first year we ever went in. I mean, it was a soul-destroying year because we lost games by 3 points and 2 points, and everybody was getting really down. So we went down into Div 2, but we won Div 2, came back up. And at that point, I was learning more and taking on board more things and adopting more things. And we started to move up the league, and we started then, because it's really strange, but people are drawn, they want to go and play for winning teams. You see, for me, why not go and play for a good team that's fighting to go up the system, not want to go to someone who's already made it there. But anyway, that was this. And a number of players came to university in Sheffield, and we'd got the girls that were developing from our own system. And so I got together a core of players who were used to playing together, used to the way I did it, because some people got a shock when they first came to play for us. I remember one very athletic young woman scored a lot of points, came from Loughborough, and she missed a training session. And so when she came to the next one, I asked her why she'd missed it. I said, first of all, you should phone me. Secondly, it needs to be a really good excuse. And she said, well, didn't have to do that at the last club. And it took a bit of time for her to assimilate into that mode. But I think when you've got a core of people who do, then it's much more difficult not to do, because you can see the others adhering to standards of training, of attendance, of, all that important stuff, the discipline that you're talking about. And if you don't adhere to it, you stick out like a sore thumb. So people sometimes took a bit of time getting into the way we did things. But then we ended up with a real good core, one or two. My daughter, Vanessa, met somebody at the World Student Games, and she wanted to come and play. And so we got a really good core of players. We worked really hard. We got all the ingredients, great guards, a superb post, and the most important thing, everyone with the right attitude. And from then, we just went up the league till we got into the 7th place. And I mention this because you know how they hold the playoffs. So 7 plays 2 in the final playoffs. 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, and so on. So we were playing 2. And it was the YMCA down in London. And they had Andrea Congreve in their team at the time, and Sadie Mason, who was a great player. They had some really good players. It was, I think it was Mark Clark coaching them. And we went down as number 7 to play 2. And we'd actually missed out. A couple of players couldn't go because they were they went, but they couldn't play because they were injured. And that left us with 7 players. So I just said, jokingly, right, girls, it's the Magnificent 7 today. And they responded, and we beat them. And would you believe I got a phone call from England basketball at the time saying, well, you'll have to send me all your information now, because I'd already set the program up.
What was the first time you realized that your team was really starting to get to the next level, and that, you saw some real progression and something that was starting to grow?
Well, I think the first time we went into Europe and we were playing a Spanish team, and we were at home first, and everybody in basketball just about was telling me how wonderful the Spanish were, and they were always athletic, they could shoot, they could do this, they could do that. And I have to confess, we all got a bit sort of, hang on here, are we going to get, really sorted out. And we were expecting these miraculous players. And so we started the game and we went 14-0 down after about 3-4 minutes. And I called a timeout and I said, right, now's the time to start realizing we can beat these. We played for 4 minutes and I looked at them and I thought, why was I so scared of him? Because I'd had all this advice from people about how good they were, how athletic they were, and all this, that, and the other. And I'd fallen, prey to it. But 4 minutes into the game, I realized we could beat them. So I called the timeout, called it, and actually we went on. And I think we lost by 2 points. So I was actually, in the end, pleased with everybody because everybody turned out the sort of performance that I knew we were capable of. My only problem then was worrying about if we actually beat them. It was a 2-legged at that time, that if we did actually beat them, because I thought we go over there and we're prepared, I'm not expecting miracles from them like I was before, we stand a good chance. But there were 2 reasons we didn't. One, from playing us the first time, they brought in a new American player. And so when we got there, it was a bit of a surprise, really, to see this. She was very good, tall, very good player there. But we got past that, worrying too much about that. But then on my mind all the time was the fact that if we did win this, how would we afford the next round? I actually phoned FIBA up and asked them, I said, what if we can't afford to play, we get through and we can't afford to play the next round? And they said, we'll just fine you the same amount of money. So, having said that, I couldn't coach not to win. So the fact that, we overall lost by an aggregate of 3 points, it happened. But it just shows you, doesn't it, the things that I certainly think that British coaches have had to work with all their lives.
Coach, can you talk to me about how your coaching philosophy was developing at this stage and what you were doing tactically and technically around this time?
Well, the thing was that I was never a big advocate of rigid offences and plays. And what I picked out of nearly every coaching clinic I went to was get your fundamental skills right. Get your fundamental skills right. So I concentrated more on that, really, than learning complicated offences. And I always thought that one of the most valuable things you have as a coach in your players is the creativity of the players. I mean, some players have great basketball IQs, and why limit them? And I always said to them, I don't care if you change the offense as long as you change it for something better and worthwhile. And I tried to do offenses where every time they caught the ball, it wasn't just one thing you did, but you had at least 3 options that then the play would follow on from that one option. From that one position, but there were 3 options. Because who can actually say you're going to be there at that point on that court?
Were you around this time? Were you rigid in your systems, like offense and defense, transition? Were they changing season to season, or were you trying to keep a kind of core set of structure, season to season?
Yeah, it was really. I put it, and bits I put together from different coaches. And also, I also believe you got to play an offense that suits the players you've got. And we, for some years in the 90s, would you believe, we had quite a small team. So I actually initiated a 1-4 offense, basically to keep players away from the basket, because near to the basket, we were the smaller team. So we used that as a basic. And funnily enough, we've still got a number of those players who are playing in Masters tournaments, and they still want to use the 1-4 offense.
How did you build such a culture of winning, almost on an unprecedented scale? Some of these seasons are just almost incredible that I've read about and people have told me about. So how did you build such that culture?
I didn't particularly see myself as a pioneer or anything. For me, in some respects, a lot of it was instinctive coaching in terms of, look at this game, this is what's happening, we need to be able to change the way we play to fit in, to help us, beat the other team. And above all, the underlying aspect I said to every player was, you've got to be tough. You must be tough. You must give it everything you've got. And I've always said, give me 5 players who will go on court and die for you, and you'll not lose many games.
It sounds like to me that your standards and your values were so strong and obviously are so strong that your players commit 100% to everything that you talk about and you value. That's
what we did. We played as hard as possible and competed for everything. I had one player, and I used to say to the others, the great thing I like about her is if there's a loose ball near her, I know that she'll either get it or there'll be a jump ball. I knew that nobody would ever take it off her. And that's the sort of player you need.
Coach, talk to me about how you felt when you retired from senior coaching. Just your thoughts on what you'd achieved and the next stage.
Well, even when I think when I actually retired from coaching in the WBBL, my daughter took over, I didn't really. I said that's, I'm retired. I ended up taking the under-14s. I love coaching. I love coaching the young ones. It's just something I'm sure must know that you either love coaching or you don't. And it's and what I think's wrong, and just stepping back a little bit, I never knew what was what. When John Atkinson sent me an email saying, oh, you're now the first coach to coach 500 National League games, I hadn't even got a clue. I didn't know. My main objective, and I love the team, I've had some fantastic characters in the team, which has always been a major influence tough, fantastic characters, people that you'd want to know, off the court and that sort of stuff. But people like John, I've always looked up to John. He's got, such knowledge and skill. I think it's really wrong that he isn't used more for many of the initiatives that come out involving coaches. His knowledge is so much. I don't see myself being as knowledgeable in any way, shape, or form as John. And I certainly have never had a desire to or done much actual presentations to coaches. But I see him as a great coach.
Coach, talk to me about your thoughts on British basketball coaching in general, and also maybe some thoughts on our coach education system, which I know that you've had quite a lot of involvement with.
To be fair, at one time, people were voted on the board by position in terms of, was it coaching, was it competitions, was it refereeing? You weren't voted on just as a board member. You had a particular responsibility. And I never ever thought of standing for the board. It was Martin Shaw at Derby who said to me, Director of Coaching is coming up, Betty, at the next annual general meeting. Why don't you go for it? You do so much. So I thought, I might do. So I went for it and I got voted in. And I have to say that I was given a lot of help and leeway by the board and the chairman and the people at that time. So I didn't feel restricted by them in any way. And I brought a number of things in. I introduced the annual coaching conference, and I tried to always get a worthwhile coach who was leading on the conference. But I also remember that at one conference, and of course I went to coaching things put on by Sport England and you name it, and I introduced the idea of revalidation because I think that's correct. Some people get a level 2 award and that's it. But you need to keep refreshing your mind and the way you do things and listening to other people. So I brought up the idea of revalidation at this particular coaching conference. And obviously one or two people said, oh, well, you'll lose a lot of coaches, won't you? And I said, well, if we do, they're not the sort of coaches we want. Anyway, it started to turn a bit in that direction. And then, and I regret this, I never should have done it, I was asked to be chair of Basketball England. And I didn't want to do it at first, but the board, and do you remember people like David Latham? He in the end persuaded me to do it. And one or two other people on the board. And I became chair. I wish I'd never done it. I wish I'd stayed as director of coaching because that's where my real love is. And I felt that from then, a number of ideas that the coaching conference ended up disappearing. Revalidation flew into the mists of yonder. And I don't know, I just think it needs somebody out there who wants to get hold of it by the neck and say, right, this is what we're going to do. And I don't think people should be allowed to keep a coaching award if they don't revalidate it. Having said that, it's then up to the governing body to ensure that they can easily do that.
Coach, what would you do with our coach education system to improve our coaches and the standard of coaching?
I do think, well, I don't know if you've heard, but they're trying to revive the BCA, the Football Coaches Association. And I think that's something they need to be sure they do properly, encourage people. I do think that we've got to talk about knowledge and teaching. I mean, for instance, I have a grandson who's 25, and due to a sight disability, he was a great player up to 18, but from 18, he decided to leave and go into coaching because of coping with the increased pressure of the older age groups. And he loves coaching. Now, I talked to him about going on clinics and attending this or that or the other. But what they have nowadays is the internet, you see. And he does research an inordinate amount of stuff on coaching. But I still say to him, you still need that other aspect. You need to talk to other coaches. You need to listen to other coaches. I mean, he listens. We do speak with him. Vanessa speaks with him a lot about coaching. But most of his stuff he gets through the internet. As it turns out, is turning out to be a really good coach. He coaches our under 14 girls, and they absolutely love him, even though he is tough on them.
Coach, again to the end of our chat today, so I'm going to give you some end of game questions. I call these rapid fire. And the first question, which I know is, of all the coaches I asked this to, totally unfair to you, but could you name the favorite players that you have coached?
It is unfair because one of the main things was we don't have superstars in this team. We're a team, no iron team. So I would say in answer to that question, my favorite player is any player who goes out onto the court and shows me what they want to do, and that is to win.
That's an awesome answer. And to be honest with you, I'm sure a lot of the coaches that I ask want to answer that way, but fantastic answer. Favorite all-time basketball coach?
Oh yes, Ettore Messina. Honestly, he just blew me away when I went to watch him at a clinic in Paris. By far.
A great answer, and one of my all-time favorite coaches, and I know that name has come up a number of times. Last question, do you have a favorite go-to saying?
Well, the one I said the most was, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And sometimes made them even dance to it.
Coach, I want to say it has been a real honor and a privilege to have had you on the Timeout podcast. And I want to lastly say that I think I speak not only for the British basketball coaching fraternity, but also the whole of British basketball when I say thank you for all that you have done for our game and for coaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for your kind words. Much appreciated.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Timeout. You can now find all of our episodes on iTunes and Spotify, so please like, subscribe, and let us know who you'd like to hear from in a future episode.